Co-directing on this project felt really important because Gareth's the director of many years' experience and a theatre director first and foremost. And I am an actor who became a playwright through a series of circumstances that I couldn't have predicted. So this is a very new experience for me directing theatre, and I'm quite green and new to all of it. So I think my knowledge of the text and the interpretation that I created and Gareth's knowledge of his craft meant that we made a good team, and collaboration is also something that we're both fond of and good at.
I mean, my first response to the text was like hearty laughs. I found it incredibly funny, do you know? And so I think that spark of that first read, that's what you've got to try and find again, haven't you? You know, once you put it on your feet and things like that. I came to the process a little bit later than Michael, John and Isobel, so I wasn't involved in any of the developments. So it already developed into a pretty decent script actually at that point. So I was coming to it with fresh eyes. I found it really funny. I found it very moving at points. And as a director, like incredibly exciting to stage because it's quite bonkers actually. You know, they go from a small rural town in the borders through to a pirate ship underwater. They trek throughout the highlands and islands. So it felt like a real challenge, but that felt exciting. We nearly always had the same idea.
Yes.
And if the ideas were different, it wasn't that one was right or wrong. It was like, well, let's try this for now, or let's try that for now. So actually we settled into a rhythm pretty quick, I would say.
And I think the capacity you have to collaborate harmoniously is less maybe about you always agreeing, for example, and more about you sharing a philosophy about what collaboration looks like and what rehearsals actually ought to be. And rather than them being some kind of top-down dictatorial process where you come in with your vision and you just need all the people to realise it and not come with any ideas of their own. We both, I think, really actively believe that rehearsals a period of live discovery. And so it's the whole thing is a conversation up until the point that it all comes together. And I think as a result of that, it felt very organic and easy.
So I came on board right from the beginning of that casting process, worked with Isobel and Michael John McCarthy, Michael Howell, who's our casting director as well. And yeah, we discussed each of the characters, but actually it's an ensemble piece, so you need flexibility and a kind of generous spirit, I suppose. And also we wanted to create a room that was really playful in terms of creativity and ideas. And it goes on a long tour as well. So we always said, let's find nice people who care about the work, but also want to come to work with a smile on their face. So again, it's about having that shared philosophy in terms of the type of actor we're looking for. Because this type of work is not for everyone, you know. They're running around backstage constantly, they're changing costumes, they're pushing bits of scenery on stage, they're getting thrown a double bass and they've got to play it for like 5 seconds and then pass that on. So actually there's a kind of self-selecting quality to who wants to put themselves forward, and pretty quick you kind of whittle it down to a whole bunch of brilliant actors. And in Scotland, actually we're blessed with loads of brilliant actors who are multi-skilled.
I think the joy of it is you're exposing the mechanics of what you're doing on stage and sharing that with the audience. So if the vast majority of the music is played live, if what we call the push and pull, the sort of scene changes and costume changes are done by the actors themselves, often in view of the audience, then you are demonstrating the work that goes into making a piece of theatre live and move, and that can be a really joyous thing for an audience to watch. There's something really impressive about the resourcefulness required for any one member of that ensemble to play a reel, sing a song, play 3 different characters, hat swap, tell a joke, and then flip a piece of scenery around to begin a new bit of storytelling. But it's incredibly slow work to rehearse. Because you can't say our fantastic stage management team will deal with that once we get into tech. You have to say, no, the ensemble need to be able to move through this whole piece of theatre essentially like a dance. So they need to know exactly where they're going to put that whiskey bottle down, who they'll receive that violin from, and then how they're going to get into that jacket jacket in order to be there for the top of that bar. Although Kidnapped is a play with songs, there are parts of it that are as technical as making a musical, and that meant logistically it was a real challenge in rehearsals.
We approached discovering the characters through chat first of all, I suppose, just like really open chat about who we think these characters are and the style of work as well, because it's a heightened piece, it's not naturalistic. So we spent a bit of time at the beginning of rehearsals talking about the tone of the piece. It's a piece that needs real forward momentum. The rhythms of the text technically need to be quite fast and have a sense of drive. We talked about things being front-footed and full-bodied, and I think we noticed quite early on that actually if you kind of lean back on the text and I don't know, quiet or something, kind of doesn't work, does it? You got to be front-footed and give it some, and then the text kind of starts to come together. And through those discussions about technically the text, but also who these characters are, things started forming, and also just that ability to play. Yeah, I mean, we mucked about with accents loads. We were like, we'll try in a Cockney accent. That doesn't feel quite right in terms of I don't know, class. Let's try it in kind of a high status accent. What would that be? So we just tried lots of different versions, I suppose, in the first couple of weeks, and then soon each person started to settle on a version of a character, which I suppose worked both individually, but also crucially helped in terms of the whole. And it's a bit of give and take sometimes, because sometimes individually a certain characterization might work wonderfully, but something doesn't quite sit right in terms of the overall makeup of the ensemble. And I suppose that's our job, just to go give it a nudge this way because we need this to work over here. So it's about playing, I think, characterization.
I think there are various rehearsal techniques that you can use to help actors really define their characters one from another, and I think that's something that was particularly important in this show because it's a multi-rolling ensemble show. So for various actors, they're playing 8 different characters, and they each need to be really clearly defined for an audience. Equally, because it's an action-adventure story, all of those characters need to be memorable. They need to be worth our while, having spent the time with. So in a way, it's almost that like Spielbergian tradition of the adventure story, where every crazy character our hero meets along the way is either going to help or hinder their progress. And so for some actors, it's about nailing the voice. For some, it's about the physicality, and for others, they want to think much more about the bigger picture, the story, and what part they are of it. And then for others, they really need to think about a complex emotional internal world in order to really nail a character. I think one thing that we did in this piece, which is dear to me certainly, is allow actors to play out with their casting type. So there's absolutely no need for us to look at how an actor presents and say, you're going to play a character who might traditionally present as you do. In a play like Kidnapped, anybody can be anything. And so that often means people really stepping out of their comfort zones as actors, and that can make some people feel very vulnerable or emotional. But once you break down those barriers, you realise that the possibilities are endless for an actor, and that's a really liberating thing to be able to land upon.
The challenges with time management, actually, I think that was a big thing, the logistics of it. We had so many different departments vying for the time, and of course they're all really important because this piece is a kind of, it has everything in it, doesn't it? I'd like to think. There's the musicians and the singing and the live music, but also there's the movement department. So E.J. Boyle did brilliant choreography and movement direction, but we had both big set pieces and then also movement, which was kind of more subtly woven throughout the piece. The scene work, kind of rehearsing the scenes with the dialogue that doesn't involve any X, Y, and Z. There's all the sections about the transitions. So there was maybe 30 scenes, and each scene there was a bit of scenery moved, but we wanted to make sure that was properly integrated into the storytelling, actually. So we needed to treat each one of those with as much reverence as any scene, any piece of music. So, I mean, yeah, time management was the biggest challenge for me, I think, probably for both of us.
Exactly, time management. And because ultimately, at the end of the day, the clock strikes 6, and you've got to dismiss people because that's the end of the working day. And that can work, and scheduling can be really rigorous if everything goes exactly to plan. But by the time we were in tech on stage, there was, for example, a single wire that went across the stage from one particular object into the wing. And this wire caused we lost hours to trying to negotiate how it would get moved around the stage. And it only takes one thing like that for suddenly a schedule to unravel, and then a show can get into trouble. So yeah, it was nippy points.
I've not even mentioned fight direction.
No.
So there's huge big fight sequences as well. Yeah, so just there's a lot in it.
And we're fighting, flying, things like this are concerned.
Flying.
Obviously, safety is such a major concern, and you can't rush safety. So that is something that necessarily takes up a huge amount of time as well. So, yeah.
We grappled with how we would show travel in the play through the design process initially, working with Anna Orton, and just playing about with ideas and talking a lot about traditions of Scottish theatre as well, and this notion of poor theatre and how we can use our imagination. Geographically, the play travels on land, on sea, from the Highlands to the Lowlands. It covers a large distance. So we knew we would have to keep it simple in some ways. Problem is, in simplicity, often becomes really, really complex. So we tried to approach something that felt simplistic, but the technicality of it was quite complex in the end. But we're both interested in how you can have scenography that starts as one thing and then transforms into a different thing. And so with us, we had something that appeared to be a big boulder that turned into a kind of music hut for a drummer, and then that turned into a cliff edge in the Highlands. It turned into the cabin of a pirate ship. So how we could take single objects and really milk them for all they're worth in terms of the effects they have in terms of the design. So yeah, we kind of took that philosophy and tried to do everything in that way, didn't we?
I think that's it. And things like travel and passage of time are really difficult in theatre, because nobody wants time to be passing, and nobody wants to have to wait for a journey to be over. And although so much of Kidnap the novel is about, and then we had to begin this journey, and that took days, and the many, many days, or the wait felt like this. But in the theatre, we're sitting down for a limited amount of time, and we want it to come at us. So these can be really tricky things to depict interestingly and well, but I think the bag of tricks you've got at your disposal are anything between making an actor run on the spot to a beautiful bit of projection by our designer and projectionist set across Scottish rock, so that we actually see figures travelling along a little line, to what the lighting designer can do to make day turn into night, what music can do to denote a passage of time, and what the ensemble doing the push and pull and moving the set can do. So often it's about having a still point and then a moving point around that, something still and something that moves, to create contrast, movement by contrast, whether that's of time or across space. So there are so many ways to do it. Discovering how to do it is definitely the hardest and the most satisfactory part of the process. I think principally it's a play about Scotland and Scottishness, and therefore it's a play about identity, and that identity extends to all different aspects of identity. The single person in which all of that is encapsulated is Davy, our hero. It's really about who we all are, and what team we feel we're part of, what Scotland we feel we're part of, and the many Scotlands within Scotland that there are. So much of it is about travel, borders, boundaries within the self, and on the kind of Scotland that we inhabit. So I think so much of what we try to tease out from the script and the work with the actors was to do with that sense of identity and purpose. Some of the really key relationships in this story are David Balfour with himself. So he's a frustrated young man who is at a tricky age. He's 19 in our adaptation of Kidnapped, and so although he would love to be taken completely seriously, he still can't quite take himself completely seriously. He's really lacking in any life experience, and so he feels he needs to prove himself. But how can he possibly prove himself if no one will give him the opportunity to? So he's trapped in a difficult place where he's not really sure who he is yet, and by the end of his character arc, his journey that he goes on, he knows exactly who he is and he's become an adult. Some key relationships that he has are that with his uncle, his only surviving relative at this point, and I think it's through that relationship that David's limits, trust, naivety all start to get tried and tested. And then the fundamental big event in his life when he's kidnapped and he finds himself as part of a subculture, a culture unrecognisable to him. So he's grown up in the Scottish borders, surrounded by people who, to him, they remind him all of each other. It seems like a homogenous culture, which can't possibly be true. They must all be individuals, but they're repressed by the culture they live in. Suddenly he's on a pirate ship where this completely wild bohemian other lifestyle plays out, and these larger than life characters surround him, and so in the context of that he's then other and he has to figure out who he is there. But the single most important relationship, of course, is between him and Alan Breck Stewart, because what this represents is the first time Davy falls in love, but also the first time Davy finds himself in a relationship of mutual dependence of some kind. And it's through these two men figuring out what it is that are their respective strengths and weaknesses, and how they're more or less directly in opposition, those strengths and weaknesses, that they're able to really discover who they are and therefore fully realise themselves, which is the only way that any of us can really actually love and be loved, I think. There's ancient and folkloric Scottish culture, but then there's also the Victoriana of the period that the book itself is actually written in, and crucially of Robert Louis Stevenson's wife, who literally speaks to us from that period on stage. But then there's all the pop cultural and musical influences.
80s music, like a whole host of kind of 80s tunes that are mostly very recognisable and probably some that are less recognisable. I think it's all of that jamming up against one another, which made it an exciting piece and kind of recontextualised the original work against a new story, actually, and made you think about each of those different pieces from a different era in a different way.
And that's what Stevenson's doing. He's going, it's mid-18th century, but I'm writing about it from a Victorian perspective. And then we are distilling all of those through a 21st century perspective. But also they are able to manifest themselves in a piece of theatre in far more ways than they can in a book, in the sense that Anna Orton's design, that's borrowing from so many different eras. Yeah. She had Victorian elements, loads of 80s elements, but 90s as well. MJ McCarthy's score, and also the language that we use in the piece, which includes lots of modern language and lots of truly ancient language. Because we were able, thanks to Alistair White's Gaelic consultancy, to have lots of beautiful Gaelic.
I mean, I'd like audiences to come away having laughed a lot, having been moved by any aspects of the piece, actually, and just with a sense of joy and hope as well, actually. I know that sounds really simple in some ways, but genuinely, I think I think if you can do that to an audience, you're onto a winner, because that's what theatre should do. It should make you laugh, make you cry, move you. It might make you look at the world in a different light, but it needn't. It might just make you feel good about yourself for a couple of hours, and that's enough sometimes, do you know?
Yeah, and in fact, if it's made you feel bad about yourself, it's going to fail to do anything else besides. Yeah. So I think that's the thing, is that we are honoured to get to make theatre, and we have an obligation to entertain audiences first, and then anything that follows is exquisite. I suppose the central character's story is about survival, even when it seems highly unlikely that you can survive, and a belief that you can rely on yourself to survive, that there's enough love and goodness in you that you can get through the hard times to better ones. And so yes, hopefully they leave with a sense of that hope.
And all I ever knew, only